Welcome in another edition of Cardinal Sports Live. We're not live this time, but am joined by David Hendren, one of our basketball reporters here at Cardinal Sports. He's been doing some great stuff for us, especially in the preseason with our basketball player profile series, and he's going to be writing about the games this winter. And Louisville just had their first game on Monday night, opening night of the college basketball season, in what was a dominant win for the Cardinals, 104-45 over South Carolina State. We're going to talk all about it, what stood out, players, what we didn't like, what we liked, and then just kind of talk about what we've seen over this 3-game sample size from Louisville basketball. So, David, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Looking forward to chopping it up through the first 3 games, and definitely appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so I think when you look at the schedule, I think we knew that these 2 exhibitions against Kansas and Bucknell, they were going to be tougher games than they're used to playing in the exhibitions. I think last year they played Lenore-Rhine, was a team a couple of years ago, Young Harris College, Spalding, teams like that that aren't, Division I caliber basketball programs. But obviously Kansas and Bucknell was a team that won the regular season in the Patriot League last year, and we know what Kansas is. But I think there were some overreactions after that first Kansas game, and I think, a week and a half later, a lot of people are starting to see the full potential of this Louisville team. What kind of stood out to you above everything else last night against South Carolina State?
I would just say the overall defensive engagement from start to finish. Especially in the first half as well. South Carolina State only shot 10.3% from the field in the first half and were 3 of 29. So I thought Louisville was just very engaged from the jump at the point of attack, forced a lot of difficult, tough twos in the mid-range, weren't allowing paint touches. I just thought they were absolutely exceptional on the defensive end last night.
I guess when it comes down to shooting the basketball, we saw in the Kansas game, it was a game where shots didn't go in, and the past 2, the second exhibition against Bucknell, and then last night, obviously, they shot it at a good clip. Is this team, you think, going to be similar to last year's in terms of it's living and dying by the 3 a lot? Because I think that was one of the pitfalls of last year's roster. When it comes down to it, is there was just some nights where, the ball wasn't going in the basket. And I think we saw that especially early on in the season last year. I think as the schedule got weaker in the ACC, they were able to overcome it in different areas. But when they played good teams and the shot wasn't going in, they struggled to keep up.
Yeah, I think obviously with Kelsey's system, the 3-point shot is definitely very valued, just the points per shot metrics that they kind of look into. I think this year's team has definitely more shooting on paper than last year's. And I think with Mikel at the helm, just his ability to get paint touches and get those looks, like those are going to be shots that they're going to digest as long as they're the right ones. I will say, though, I think some other ways that they can kind of alleviate that pressure in terms of living and dying by the 3 is Ryan Conwell at Xavier showed his ability to get in the paint, get to the free throw line, draw contact. He was a solid rim finisher that I kind of touched on his profile, and he was even better at Indiana State the year prior. But I think with all the floor spacing surrounding him compared to Xavier's team last year, I think he'll be even better as a slasher and getting into the paint and finishing. And I think Mikel is a decent slasher as well. It's definitely clear that he can get paint touches with his speed and spray it out to shooters. But I think living and dying by the 3 in totality, I don't think they'll necessarily heavily rely upon it, but there's no question that the 3-point shot is definitely a valued shot with the way that they play. There's going to be nights it goes in and nights where it doesn't.
Yeah, so Mikel, 4 of 6 from the field, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists. He did turn it over 3 times last night, but I really thought he was in complete control in the minutes that he played, especially with the way he started. He was really aggressive, getting into the lane. I think he decided coming into the night that he wanted to set the tone as a handler and as a facilitator. And like you said, him just being able to get into the teeth of the defense, drive and kick, and just kind of attract bodies, really opened some things up for Louisville early on in the perimeter. And I mean, there's no better way to get into a good rhythm shooting the basketball than to get early open looks, right? And that's exactly what happened for Louisville in the initial minutes of the game. And I mean, he's going to have nights like this where 9, 10, 11 points, but he's also going to have nights where he explodes offensively. But tonight I thought was a really good balance from him in terms of looking for his shot, not overdoing it like he may have against Kansas, trying to force some shots up early on in the shot clock. He was being more patient within the offense. And I think, it's only game 3 for him in a Louisville uniform. We're going to see more growth, but I think these are some good early signs of a guy that's not trying to do too much and staying in his role as a freshman point guard.
Yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment, especially just over the last 2 games. I mean, coming out in the Bucknell game, I thought it was just really indicative of his ability to kind of just like feel the game out a little bit. He was playing more off the ball, and I asked Kelsey kind of a question about if that's like something that they emphasize, but he was pretty much just saying that's kind of part of just how the offensive continuity works within the flow of their offense. The ball just kind of finds you, and shots will find you. And I think he did a really good job of just taking advantage of coming off handoffs, off pin downs, off flares. Like the ball is just finding him. And you mentioned kind of getting his teammates, the ball and getting them to their spots and finding them shots. Once he kind of did that at the initial part of the game, and then the ball just started finding him for open looks afterwards.
So, as we were saying, we had a little brief pause there, some connection issues, but regardless, Khani Rooths, as we came to know yesterday and discovered that it's not actually Ruth like tooth, but it's root like a tree root, right? Which I never knew that, which is pretty embarrassing. I think I've just been saying it which it kind of sounds the same if you say it really quickly, roots. But regardless, David, I thought it was his best performance in a Louisville uniform yesterday. 20 points, 8 of 12 from the floor, 7 rebounds. That's third on the team yesterday. Also added 3 assists, a block, and a steal to go along with it. I mean, he looks the part physically this year. He's grown. But he's also, I mean, we saw an improved handle. I thought a much smoother and less clunky jumper. And he was able to get to the rim a couple times with some crafty dribbling and finishing tools that he wasn't really flashing last year. I mean, you kind of watched him at times and it felt like it was drive, dunk, or nothing for him. But he scored at all levels. He had a 3. Got to the rim when he wanted to, the foul line, 5 free throw attempts, just a really complete offensive game for Khani.
Yeah, he was very impressive. You mentioned like the physical growth. Kelsey was talking about how when they came in and Coach Eli Foy, the strength coach, measured him, he had grown about an inch to an inch and a half, and he's obviously put on some muscle mass, especially up top. So yeah, physically he's definitely more developed, but yeah, just from a performance standpoint, definitely one of the more memorable performances so far from him, just getting to the rim, ripping the rim off, blowing plays up defensively, cutting drives off, rebounding the ball defensively. You mentioned kind of some improved ball handling. He had that catch in the I believe it was the left corner and had a right to left cross and then just drove and threw one down. So yeah, he definitely looked more fluid, more confident. and had some, just more offensive confidence, just kind of looking for his offense and getting to the rim and being a little more, just improvising a little bit more. But yeah, definitely a very strong performance from him overall.
I mean, obviously the competition has to matter, and I think we all can agree that South Carolina State isn't the best litmus test for this team, and especially for a guy like Khani, who against a team like that, he's going to be the most athletic guy on the floor no matter what. So he's able to use his length and athleticism in ways that he wouldn't normally be able to. But I mean, what kind of a role do you kind of see him carving out this season? Because I mean, he played in every game last year. I think he was around 13, 14 minutes a contest, did some really good things. I thought in spurts, he really gave them a spark when they needed it at times. But I mean, if you look at the wings, you have Hadley and Pryor, obviously, if/when he returns. But what kind of a role do you see Rooths kind of carving out for himself?
Yeah, I think he'll do a decent amount of the same stuff as last year, just in terms of being an energy raiser, someone who's going to attack the glass, finish plays as a cutter, and and in transition as well. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some fluidity in the front court right now, just given the 4 spot and just the uncertainty in terms of when Pryor's going to return, and then he's also just coming off a major knee injury, so he's going to have to adjust to the game speed and the physicality and stuff. So there's definitely room for opportunity for Pryor to get significant minutes, and Kelsey's just definitely advocated his faith and confidence in him. So I mean, I think there's going to be nights where he plays 12 to 14 minutes, and then other nights where he's really got it going and he's providing a major spark, and maybe he plays 20 to 24 minutes.
Well, last night was definitely one of those nights for Khani Rooths, and I was even thinking about it with his growth. I think that he's listed at 6'10". He definitely has added more size and muscle and looks stronger. I've always thought of him as having great two-way potential and definitely, high defensive upside in his college career and really as a basketball player in general. But I think he might be able to find a role this season as a kind of interior force in some of these lineups, especially with some of the questions defensively in the front court. I'm really curious to see how much Pat Kelsey plays him defensively in the front court. I don't think he's a great matchup against a lot of the physical centers that Louisville will face, but in a matchup like last night where there's some skinnier, more frail front court players on the opposing side, I think he really can make a difference in that kind of a role. And that's one that a lot of people are talking about that this team needs, right? The one big hole is rim protection. Are they going to be able to get stops against some of these better front courts? We didn't really see that in the Kansas game. We actually saw it being a bit of a problem.
Yeah, there's definitely some fluidity just in terms of the 5 spot, with just kind of the only like real rim protector on paper being Sananda Frew, but he's obviously going to have to adjust to just the high major, physicality and just adjusting to the American game in general, the speed of the game. So, I mean, there were even lineup combinations last year where Hadley would play some minutes at the 5. I think Pryor's going to get some time at the 5 when he comes back. And then, Rooths with the added growth, especially from a height standpoint, and then like you mentioned, him putting on some weight, he could possibly get some minutes there too. So there's a lot of I think there's just going to be a lot of improvising in terms of the 5 and just them kind of experimenting with that position throughout the season.
Well, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about what you saw in terms of the lineups yesterday, and I kind of was under the impression that over the first 2 exhibition games, they were being a little bit creative and testing the waters a little bit with what would work and what wouldn't work on the floor together, because this is a group of guys with so many different skill sets, right? I mean, you start even looking at the big men. I mean, you have three completely different players who are comfortable playing the 5 spot at this level. And that's obviously going to allow Pat to do a lot of really cool things with his lineups. But one thing that I saw in particular with the guards is that he really tried to have two guys out there who were comfortable handing the basketball at all times. And even if that's using a guy like Kobe Rogers a lot off the bench, I think Kobe played the most minutes last night. And obviously, I mean, they were blowing them out. But it was rare for him to put a lineup out there with two bigs and a guy like Rooths, McNeely, and Brown per se. He almost always had Woolley, Brown, Conwell, or Rogers, two of them out there together at the same time. But what stood out to you with the lineups last night? And do you think that's kind of the rotation and starting lineup that we'll see?
Yeah, I personally think as of right now, that'll be the starting lineup that they'll kind of just stick with for the foreseeable future. In terms of lineup combinations, I agree to your point with multiple ball handlers, especially when you're playing a team like South Carolina State, who pretty much pressed the whole game. You're going to need multiple ball handlers, especially in that situation when they're trying to speed you up and create turnovers all the time. But I think this is, kind of to the sentiment that we've been talking about with the exhibitions and them getting a chance to play against like legitimate Division One opponents, that they can experiment. And they even had, I saw some lineups where they would put Frew at the 4 and Zoo at the 5. So this is the time to really experiment in those regards and kind of see what you have in there, at least consider those possibilities and see what you kind of get from those different lineup combinations along the way.
Well, I mean, that's a good transition point to talk a little bit about the front court, and in particular, the maybe struggles that we saw in that Kansas exhibition game against what is a pretty underrated front court, I think, and obviously very talented one out that in Lawrence. But you look at the three guys that they have, all very different, and honestly, probably all very matchup dependent. I think Sananda Frew is the guy that you really can, get away with playing against everybody, but they all have their limitations. And I think that's something that is going to be an interesting storyline that we watch play out over the course of the season. Which guy is really going to separate themselves from the rest of the pack as a guy that Kelsey trusts in crunch time down the stretch of games, and is also able to do the things that he wants his center to be able to do, and that's run the floor, protect the rim, be a lob threat, be a screener, and initiate some offense. And I think all three of them are capable doing that, but I think he's tended to lean in the way of Sananda Frew so far through the first 3 games that we've seen.
Yeah, I think that's definitely kind of the safety valve, if you will, in terms of, when they're just playing any type of opponent, they'll probably lean towards Frew opposed to the other bigs. Like for instance, Ali Khalifa, I think when they play like more physically gifted, high up-tempo teams with like really gifted guards that can play and pick and roll, they'll probably lean more away from somebody like Khalifa. But when they play like a slower paced opponent with like a less athletic guards or bigs that he has to compete against, where he can really thrive with his playmaking hub ability, that'll kind of be a way that they can kind of lean towards him in that capacity. And then Zugris, I think he'll be kind of matchup dependent on who the other 5s are on the other team, considering he's a little undersized height-wise. Probably don't want him going against like a huge like big that's super skilled down low, because they can kind of just shoot over the top of him if they're 6'10", 6'11", because he's about around 6'7", 6'8". I think with the front court, it's definitely going to be very matchup dependent. And then kind of just touching on the Kansas production side of things, I touched on it in a takeaways article. They only had between the 3 bigs in total 6 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 turnovers compared to the two main primary front court pieces of Kansas with Flory Badunga and Tiller combining for 26 points and 13 rebounds, for instance. So that was a pretty eye-opening part of the game and is honestly one of the biggest parts of this team that I'm monitoring going forward into, the difficult
Right.
non-schedule.
Where do you think? Where do you think those struggles kind of came from? And looking back on it, comparing last night to night one against Kansas, have you seen anything different out of that that group, or have you seen maybe Kelsey try to put them in a different situation defensively, or what has stood out to you as a difference between those two?
Yeah, in terms of the differences, I think honestly, to be transparent, I think the matchups are, just when you have Darren Peterson in ball screens, I mean, you're talking about the number one overall pick and one of the best, pick and roll ball handler, scorers, creators in the country. So when, Ali Khalifa is getting tasked on, guarding him getting downhill or, Tiller behind him for a lob, that's a lot to ask for any big in the country, and opposed to playing South Carolina State and Bucknell, where the just the talent and athleticism
Right.
disparities are very large. They can kind of get away with different sort of ball screen coverages and kind of hiding the bigs and them not being I don't want to say exposed, but them being put on a specific wavelength where they can kind of have to deal with those certain aspects of the game at a higher magnitude. But those have kind of been the biggest things and things that I'm just kind of monitoring going forward with the front court play specifically.
I guess I kind of have a tough time with it because it's such a small sample size, and we're talking about it right after a game where they held their opponent to 23% shooting, and they didn't make a three until there was 10 minutes left in the game and forced 25 turnovers, right? And I get it, but is there a part of you that kind of worries about the backcourt defensively with this group, especially when they're facing these teams with bigger and more physical guards that can get downhill and kind of just bulldoze their way into the paint? Because I think you look at South Carolina State. I mean, those guys, I know they had the preseason player of the year in their conference, but from a size perspective, they looked frail. To me, they looked young. And I think Louisville had the advantage, but they're going to face some teams. And boy, I tell you, starting in 1 week, right, from when we're recording this against Kentucky, they're going to face some teams with these big, aggressive guards that like to get into the paint and make plays. And I'm specifically thinking about Jalen Lowe here, right? So, do you see this being a weakness for this team going forward, or am I kind of overreacting to that?
I wouldn't say a weakness, but it's definitely something to kind of just consider when you're playing against taller, bigger backcourts, like you mentioned. Especially at the high major level when they're playing, Kentucky, where they got Jalen Lowe and Otega Owe. Those are, especially Owe. He's a very big,
Right.
physical, aggressive, downhill attacking guard. And when you look at, we're kind of with our size on the, in terms of the perimeter, Conwell's about 6'3.5", 6'4". McNeely's kind of in that same ballpark. So when we're playing like bigger, taller wings that can put it on the floor and kind of shoot over top of those guys in the mid range and then finish over top of them at the rim, that's definitely something that they're going to have to combat and, just kind of try their hardest to cut off those drives and make those guys shoot over the top. Even though they're going to have to live with some of those difficult twos over the top from the mid-range at their heights.
Who has stood out to you on the perimeter defensively?
Yeah, I would say Ryan Conwell and Kobe Rogers have been the two most eye-catching perimeter defenders so far. In terms of Conwell, I think he just does a really good job of staying in a stance, keeping guys in front, not letting them get to their spots, and he has a physical frame, so guys can't really drive through him. And when they try to get to their spots, he can kind of bump and alter them off their line. I think he's also good as a help side defender, just kind of altering or sliding over on the weak side and trying to alter shots. Just staying vertical at the rim. So I've really liked what I've seen from Conwell, and then with Rogers, I just think he's pesky. He can pick up 94 feet. He can turn you. He's got really quick. Is really quick in terms of lateral quickness. He had a really nice back tip steal against Peterson, so he can kind of create some plays defensively with his quick hands and quick feet. So I think those have been the two best perimeter defenders so far. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Kobe Rogers is a player that this team didn't have last year. Like you look top to bottom, and yeah, they were decimated with injuries by the end of the season. But they didn't have that guy that could come off the bench and be a defensive spark and also handle the basketball. That weight was solely on Chucky and Terrence Edwards. And I think by the end of the year, that really wore them down. And I think there's going to be a lot of nights this year where Mikel Brown and Ryan Conwell are allowed to play 20, 25 minutes because Rogers, like yesterday, is giving them such a boost and he can hold his own against other guards. He's not going to blow you away, dazzling, getting to the basket and finding and creating for himself and his own looks, but he's going to run the point. He's going to make the right play, and he's going to really get down and defend. And I think that's going to be really valuable for this team in spurts, especially when you have games where, and Pat Kelsey has talked about this in his press conferences, is this is a defense that is probably going to foul a lot this year, and especially in the backcourt. You saw Ryan Conwell fouled out last night after playing only like 20 minutes. A guy like Kobe Rogers is just going to be so valuable in being able to give them a breath and some spurts in some big time games this season. So he's the guy to me that has really stood out on the perimeter as a defender. And then we talked about him earlier, but I think Khani Rooths is a guy that people aren't talking about enough as a defender. I think he has his ceiling defensively is extremely high as a guy who can get out, jump passes, be explosive in transition. Obviously, he's a lot of fun and he's aggressive defensively as well. So those two for me are the guys that have stood out. But you look at the backcourt in general, and I think Pat Kelsey's done a great job surrounding Mikel Brown with experience. And I think this goes to the point that I was making with Kobe Rogers, is that experience is really going to help him get through this first part of the season where the schedule does get tough. And there will be times, like I said, where Brown is in foul trouble or is having a off night shooting the basketball like he did against Kansas, and other guys are able to lift him through those moments. And I think that's going to be really crucial. And I think it's been an underrated part of this roster construction, being able to keep guys like Kobe Rogers around. And I think we're going to see this year just how valuable he really is.
Yeah, I definitely love the depth of the backcourt and just being able to, you mentioned earlier, kind of going back to Kobe Rogers a little bit, and just having more ball handlers in general, being able to get Mikel off the ball, get Ryan off the ball. Obviously Isaac's a off-ball player, but like being able to have that luxury, and also with Woolley, him being able to handle the ball too, having multiple ball handlers and allowing guys to take a breather offensively and then also channel that energy defensively is huge. And then you mentioned it, the luxury with this team compared to last year, like you mentioned, was, Chucky and Terrence had a lot of defensive responsibilities. Mikel's not going to have that, burden where you can just put Kobe Rogers out there or Woolley onto a specific guy, and then, Mikel can guard the third option offensively. That, I think, is going to be incredibly massive just from a usage and offensive responsibility standpoint. And, he's going to be tasked with so much shot creation, both for himself and teammates. So I think, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with just the emphasis on the guard depth, offensively and defensively.
And experience too, right? I mean, even a guy like Isaac McNeely, he's used to playing against some of the better perimeter players in college basketball, and he's had to guard some of them on a nightly basis in the league of ACC that they're going to be playing in this season. And even Ryan Conwell, right, being able to be the number one offensive option on a Big East team last season that made it to the NCAA tournament and the last four in. And that's going to pay dividends for this team going forward and be able to help Brown out. Going to take a quick break for the podcast, but we're going to keep going here on YouTube. The next segment and thing that I wanted to talk about, who's a guy that has kind of let you down through the first 3 games? I know it's really early, and obviously it's really tough to do this after such a big victory, and they were winning by 44 points at halftime. But who's a guy who maybe hasn't found his groove yet, or you still have a lot of questions about regarding their role?
Honestly, I've been pretty happy with the majority of the roster, but one player I'm just kind of monitoring right now in terms of just how their role develops and their production is just is Adrian Woolley.
That was going to be mine.
With just like the obviously transferring up from Kennesaw State, that's one factor, and then there's just so many faces in the backcourt that he's competing with for minutes, and then I think he's just really trying to find his footing right now and kind of own in on what his role is, just going from a primary shot creator that has the ball in your hands all the time and boasts like a very high usage rate to just playing with so many other ball handlers and scorers and creators. So I think he's just trying to find his way right now. I wouldn't say I'm like down on him or lower on him than I was before the season, but I'm just monitoring kind of just how he kind of eases his way into things and where he finds his identity with this team.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And he was who I was going to bring up. And again, it's not because he's played necessarily poorly or anything in the exhibitions or even last night. I mean, he played 16 minutes. He was dealing with a little bit of a calf cramp that I ended up finding out that kind of had him on the exercise bike for much of the second half. But, I mean, he's going to get his opportunities, and he will, especially early on in this season. And who knows, maybe he doesn't have a cramp and he has 15 points, right? But 5 points, he had 3 fouls, 2 assists. But he actually was handling the basketball a little bit more than I would have expected him to last night. I think Pat kind of sees him as a point guard, and when he initially committed to Louisville in the transfer portal, I immediately kind of thought of Terrence Edwards Jr. just with that kind of I know Woolley is a lefty, right? But a little bit of a similar release, and they both have that kind of silky game as a guard where they can get to their spots, and they also love being able to post up a little bit on the interior when they have mismatches and be patient in the paint. So I think the trajectory for him to end up being a type player like that is still there. Obviously, he shot the ball 41% from 3 last season, but I think maybe people are not realizing how big of a jump in day-to-day competition it is for him as a freshman to a sophomore, going from a Kennesaw State to a Louisville. And not that Kennesaw State was a bad team last year. They went 19-14 in Conference USA, but certainly Louisville is a step up for him, and there's going to be an adjustment period with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like just kind of, thinking back on some observations in terms of just his game and his performances. I think one thing that did kind of I do have a little bit of concern about is just like his ability to constantly get paint touches against this type of competition. Right. Like in the Kansas game, I just feel like a lot of his drives got cut off, and he had to, stop and resort to a kick out and relocate instead of just being able to usually use his like strong physical frame to drive through smaller defenders or kind of just get to his spots. So that was something that I kind of noticed about his offensive game that I want to see how that progresses throughout the year.
He was 59% on twos last season as a freshman in conference play. That was ninth best in Conference USA. And as a freshman guard, that's really impressive in college basketball. And I agree. I mean, I think he certainly has that quick twitch ability to blow by people and, make plays for his teammates. I think certainly that is going to be a role for him this season. But I think you also have to look at the turnovers for him. Turnover rate last year of 21.6, which obviously is not good for a guy who was handling the ball as much as he was. I think it was about even with his assist rate. So for every assist he gets, he basically turned the basketball over. If he's going to be handling the ball as much as he was in the minutes he played last night, and as a lot of people I think expected him to be, he's going to have to turn the basketball over less. So certainly a player that we're looking to see how this early season goes for him and what kind of a role he has, because certainly it's going to be different than the one he had at Kennesaw State last year. But he knows that, and I think he's understanding that this is not just a 1 year kind of a deal for him where he's just going to explode and be a lottery pick or something like that. And so Adrian Woolley certainly needing to get things going. I'm going to edit that out because I lost my train of thought. We talked a little bit about the front court, and I think that's the number one talking point when it comes to, maybe a weakness of this team. And there's not a large enough sample size for us to really decide what, they can be exposed against and vice versa. And they're going to get a great test next week against Kentucky. But David, if you had to pick something that really scares you this winter, what would it be?
I would say so far, I would say the 5 spot if I really had to pick something. And then some other kind of facets that do worry me are just the overall athleticism of this team. I think Khani is clearly the best athlete. Him and Kobe Rogers are the two best. But I think in terms of the other perimeter players, it's fine athleticism, but nothing very eye-popping in that capacity. And then also something that I noticed too is I think when, and I think we're going to come up on teams where the 3 ball's not falling and we need, some sort of offense. I think it's, I wish we had a low post scorer that we could throw the ball into when things get stagnant.
Fouls and
I know Hadley is that option in capacities, and I do love his ability to do that. But it's nice to have a big that you can kind of play through, throw the ball into inside, and he can draw doubles, kick it out to shooters like we have all over the place on this team, or just get a basket inside. Those are a few things that I do have some reservations about with this team.
But that's also not the Pat Kelsey style of play, right? I mean, he
True.
doesn't really recruit those kind of players, and that's just the kind of team that he wants to run. And I mean, so far it's been working out for him. So this team certainly can run his system well. But, there will be teams that they play against that if those teams are able to take away Louisville in transition, they're able to take away the 3-point ball, that this team, I could see them having trouble finding offense. And you think about so much of their offense in those games last year was getting to the foul line. And I do think, again, that's going to be an identity for this roster. And I think the guy that stands out to me is Ryan Conwell, and just his ability to attack the basket. I think he has that gene more than anybody else on the roster. And I think that's going to be important down the stretch in games. And in general, this is a team of all really good free throw shooters. I think they're going to be a very good free throw shooting team when it's all said and done.
Yeah, Conwell in the Kansas game took 12 free throws, I believe. He was 9 of 12. And then that's another thing that Woolley does really well is get to the free throw line. Last year, he averaged 5.1 attempts per game and was 4th in Conference USA in total free throw attempts. So those two facets are definitely important when the offense gets a little stagnant, just drawing contact, feeling out the officials, seeing how they're going to call it, and being able to just get easy points in that capacity. But yeah, that's definitely going to be a part that, just being a great free throw shooting team, getting to the line a lot like they've done in these games already. Like they've gone to the free throw line at an alarmingly high rate. Hopefully that continues. But definitely a facet of the game that Louisville can hang their hat on.
If I had to choose my weakness, I would probably say defending without fouling. I do just worry a lot about when they're playing these teams with these bigger, more physical, and also quicker guards, just them being able to keep up. And I know they play that aggressive hedge style of defense with the bigs as well. And I just think, as we've seen, fouls can really start to rack up. Last thing, and then we're going to hit it. If you could decide, and you just texted this 23.7 fouls per game through 3 games, right? You can just, you can say that next time. But that is a lot. So definitely going to need to trim that down. But this team, I want you to fill in the blank. Louisville basketball will make the Final Four in 2026 because blank.
Their backcourt. I think it's the best in the country. I think they have the most offensive firepower. I think it's the best core of shooters in the backcourt amongst any of the teams in the country. And they have a top.
How do you compare it to a backcourt like Purdue's?
I would say in terms of Purdue's backcourt, with having someone like Braden Smith that just has one, he's a primary ball handler and he has an abundance of NCAA tournament experience and playing at the highest level compared to someone like Mikel Brown, who's a freshman leading the show. I think you can kind of have a little more comfort having, like a senior ridden guard like Braden Smith, who's been there and done that at the highest levels. That would kind of be my offsetting argument to the Purdue side of things in terms of just the raw experience and playoff experience. Their postseason.
So the backcourt it is for you. Well, mine, why Louisville goes to the Final Four in 2026 is because of Mikel Brown Jr. I think that this kid is a star. I think he is an NBA star. There were a couple of times yesterday. We're filming this the day after the South Carolina State game. He just rises up to the rim, and you're like, you don't think that he has it in him with this skinny baby-faced kid out there running around, basically using his speed to get by everybody, and then he just rises up for a dunk, and it kind of is like a wow, and it's almost as if Tyrese Halliburton mixed with Steph Curry, but also had pretty good bounce and could maybe not is not going to be like Russell Westbrook level athleticism or anything, but he can rise above the rim when he needs to and hang in the air to make plays for his teammates off 2 feet. And it's being able to see it in person up close, as I have been the past 3 games, has just been extremely impressive to me. And he's better than I would have imagined. And I think he is the reason that Louisville goes to the Final Four if they do, because he would be one of the best freshmen in college basketball and one of the best players in college basketball.
Yeah, he's elite in every sense of the word. You kind of mentioned his sneaky athleticism. I remember he had that long strided drive last night against South Carolina State and then just kind of rose up and punched it, kind of like what you were talking about, that sneaky vertical athleticism. And then just you combine his ability to just process the game, feel it out in terms of when should I kind of look for my offense? When should I look for my teammates? I think that was kind of like a learning experience after the first exhibition. But just seeing him in an abundance at this point, just the combination of range shooting, I mean, he can really map the court as a passer, just getting paint touches, throwing darts with either hand to open shooters, and just having all these shooters at his disposal. Where, like he can, like you mentioned earlier, he can have games where he has 10 points and 8 assists, and Louisville can win comfortably with
Right.
him doing that, just doing what the game tells him to do because he can rely on the other offensive firepower on this team. But yeah, definitely an elite prospect. I personally think he's a top 6, top 7 draft pick at minimum, especially in a point guard driven NBA league. So yeah, he's big time, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Cardinal Sports Live. David, thank you for joining me. Had a lot of fun tonight talking about Louisville Cardinals basketball. Exciting season ahead of us. It's really going to be a lot of fun. You can check out David's work at on3.com/Cardinal Sports. We're on there. We've got stuff coming out every day, and Louisville back in action on Thursday tomorrow. They will be taking on Jackson State. We'll have coverage from that as well. David, anything you wanted to add?
Just looking forward for the rest of the season, and I appreciate everyone listening in, and look forward to providing more coverage throughout the season.
All right. We'll hear from you soon. We'll be trying to do these more frequently as the season starts kicking off. So thanks, everybody, for joining us here today, and